Welcome to A Tonic for Lunacy. I'm your host, Donna. And what I do is I talk about trauma and shadows in your body graph. And that is your human design chart. If you don't know what a body graph is, if you don't know what human design is, just go to mybodygraph.com or jovianarchive.com. I realized that I've never legitimately given human design the introduction that it deserves. So maybe one day we'll do that. What I want to talk about today is a little bit taboo. And I'm going to be honest that I don't have all of the information yet, but that's okay because it is a work in progress. What I've been struggling with a lot and what a lot of other people have been talking to me about is depression. Depression in terms of body, mind, spirit, all the things. What is it related to? So obviously that got me a little bit curious and I wanted to start exploring it in the body graph. And this is something that I have done before because, as you guys know, I openly talk about my struggle with depression and darkness and the shadows, and it's my work, right? Like I live in the shadows. So obviously that has an effect on my day-to-day life. So what I've really started to explore is looking for my own patterns and behavior in terms of depression. And I guess I have to define depression, right? Like, let's do that. Depression. I'm going to look it up. That way I don't fuck it up. Okay. A group of conditions associated with the elevation or lowering of a person's mood. Okay. Clinical depression, a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities. Where did I go? Mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities causing significant impairment of daily life. Possible causes include a combination of biological, psychological, and social sources of distress. Increasingly, research suggests that these factors may cause changes in brain function, including altered activity of certain neural circuits in the brain. The persistent feeling of sadness or loss of interest that characterizes major depression can lead to a range of behavioral and physical symptoms. These may include changes in sleep, appetite, energy level, concentration, daily behavior, or self-esteem. Depression can also be associated with thoughts of suicide. The mainstay of treatment is usually medication, talk therapy, or a combination of the two. Okay. Now we have a good idea of what depression is according to the internet. I can tell you that the way that I've experienced it is definitely sadness, hopelessness, lack of interest, lack of appetite. Just like the way that I can explain it is a deep sadness that doesn't make sense. So I wanted to start to understand it in the body graph. And so I'm going to share, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to share my chart. If you're on the podcast, you've likely seen my chart 1,000 times and you've probably memorized it by now. If you're on the podcast, then I will just try to explain it. Okay, so this is my genetic matrix chart. And what I really started to explore here is the different aspects of depression and how it can show up in our charts. So what we know from Ra is that the 2838, the channel of struggle, highly depressive. Gate 38, highly depressive. Gate 28, highly depressive. These two together create the channel of struggle, which just creates more of that depression in the not self energy, right? If we're in the true self energy and we have something to fight for, something that feels purposeful, then you're less likely to feel this depression energy of the 2838. Now what Ross said was that I believe it was gate 28, line 6 is more susceptible to thoughts of depression, thoughts of suicide. Now let's think about it, right? Like, let's talk about it. So gate 38 is the gate of the fighter. Do I have something to fight for? Do I have something to fight for? I have this little, so we're just like talking like girlfriends right now. I have this sheet that I've created for my clients in the human design shadow training, where it's the 64 gates. And each gate has I have a definition for the gate, but then I also give you the not self, the shadow aspect. So I'm going to read this to you. So 38 is the fighter. This is the natural born warrior, always down for a fight, and especially fulfilled in their purpose by fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. This is the pressure to find purpose and reason to exist in the world. So you can understand why someone in the not self, or in the distorted frequency of the energy of 38, might feel like they don't have a reason to exist. Why am I here? Everyone would be better off without me. Those are some of the really deep, depressive, dark thoughts that the 38 can have. It is also a gate of deafness, which means that the influence of others is irrelevant a lot of times. The influence of others is irrelevant. So think about how lonely someone with a 38 might feel. And then we have the 28, the shadow worker, darkness, courage, and risk taking. This is the fear of being purposeless, fear of death. Motivated to find purpose in life, knows what is worth fighting for. You will potentially face melancholy, depression, and a freeze response when you are stuck in the mind and are unable to see the purpose of life and in you and your experiences. 28.6, most likely be suicidal, always looking for others to help them find their purpose. The 28 is dependent on others to find purpose. When others won't seek this purpose or can't help you find yours, it creates massive depression. Can also be addicted to risks to create purpose or meaning. So both of these gates can be highly dependent on other people. Now, what this leads me to look at in the body graph is where might I, because this is my chart, be dependent on other people? And we know that we're dependent on other people based on our conditionings where we are open. So for me, it's always been, always will be, this completely open solar plexus. It is the bane of my fucking existence, right? But it's not just the solar plexus, it's also the ajna that's also completely open, because these two amplify each other. So what I don't see a lot of people talk about in terms of human design and conditionings is that your openness is also going to amplify the not self energy of yourself, of your distorted energy. So the distortion that comes from our definition, but also the distortion, the not self energy that comes from our other open, undefined centers. So my crown, my mind, my ajna, they're going to amplify the distorted energy of this definition. And they're going to amplify the not self energy of my undefined solar plexus. So what we know about the undefined solar plexus is the truth is your birthright, right? Truth is the way to the Holy Grail, the way to Jesus, to God, whatever you believe in. But the undefined solar plexus has such a hard time being honest, right? The dichotomy, the polarity of the body graph. It has such a hard time being honest. It lives in a secret world because it's so dependent on others to validate itself in terms of its emotions, right? In terms of how it feels. So the undefined solar plexus grows up learning that its feelings are too big. They're too much. What I feel is too much. How I understand the world is too much. It all feels too much. So for the undefined solar plexus, not understanding that a lot of these feelings, a lot of this energy is not yours, you might learn that it is not safe for you to express your feelings. It's also not safe for me to be honest, because if I'm honest, I'm going to trigger somebody else's emotional response. And if I trigger somebody else's emotional response, how is that going to affect me? Inherently selfish. That's okay. We're all selfish. But the undefined centers are also big places where we can find depression. Because think about it. All right, let's think about the nervous system. The polyvagal theory tells us that we start in fight or flight, or we start in safety, right? We start in safety, ventral. And then we go to fight or flight. And fight or flight is the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is when it kicks in and it's like, okay, we're either out or we're fighting our enemy, right? We're either going to run away or we're going to fight this cheetah. And if that doesn't work, meaning our body is still in a heightened state, it's still perceiving threat, our neuroception is still perceiving this threat in our environment, then what's left for the body to do? Go into freeze. Now, what is the freeze response? The freeze, collapse, dorsal, that is depression, essentially. It's fatigue. It's the energy has drained from your entire body because we're playing dead. Think of it as from like an animal perspective. You're literally just playing dead. So your energy is not there. Actually, while I have you on YouTube, let me share something. This is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite. Let me find it. This is one of my favorite illustrations of the polyvagal theory because it just explains it so well. Let me find it. I'm so sorry, please. New share. Now this is my, did I share the right screen? Yes. Okay, this is from Shadow Stripper School. If you don't know about Shadow Stripper School, I will add a link. But I go through all of this in Shadow Stripper School deeply. Shadow Stripper School is where we release the trauma and the shadows that are holding you back through human design, but through psychology as well. Okay, so here we know that we have ventral vagal, which is safety, social engagement, calmness, and then we go into the sympathetic, the parasympathetic nervous system, and this is fight or flight. And when this does not work, we go into freeze, and this is the conservation of energy, dorsal vagal. This is a life threat, disassociation, numbness, depression, helplessness, shame, shutdown, hopelessness. This increases our immobilization behavior. We are frozen with fear. Endorphins that numb and raise the pain threshold, and conservation of metabolic resources. It decreases your heart rate, your blood pressure, your temperature, your muscle tone, facial expressions, eye contact, depth of breath. If you're a shallow breather, social behavior, attunement to human voice, sexual response, immune response. Now, remember, if you're experiencing this, then you've already gone through the sympathetic nervous system, which has already decreased your fuel storage, your insulin activity. If you have high sugar, low sugar, your digestion, if you have bloating, if you carry a lot of weight around your midsection, relational ability, your immune response if you get sick a lot. So these are actual cues that your body gives you that you're in fight or flight or collapse. So if you experience these on a regular basis, then you know that your body on a regular basis is in fight or flight or dorsal. When you're in fight or flight for a long time, it eventually becomes collapse. It eventually becomes dorsal. This is one of the leading causes for depression, is not processing our trauma, not feeling our feelings, not working through our emotions, not doing the shadow work around it. just letting it live in our body, this is survival mode. Not understanding what causes you to be in fight or flight. This is mapping the nervous system. What are my actual triggers? This is something that I go through with my clients. What are my actual triggers? We map the nervous system. Let me go back to sharing my chart. Okay, so the undefined centers and how they can put us into fight or flight and collapse. That's what you need to look into. Now, of course, our definition is also going to affect our energy. If we're in the not self, in the distorted energy of our definition, like the 2838 that I showed you, also going to affect it. Splits. I have a small split, which means that I can unconsciously spend my entire life searching for the 25, the 27, the 52, and the 57. I can live my entire life in the not self, searching for this energy. Now, what are the effects of that? This is something that I'm still researching, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret on something that I've been playing around with, and that's T cells. So the T cells in our body are responsible for our immune system response, fighting off pathogens and bacteria. So low T cells can indicate an infection. But what Ra said, or I'm sorry, this was not Ra, this was Dr. Martin Grassinger, who worked with Ra. And I'm going to quote him again in a little bit. But what Martin said was that the T cells in our body can actually distinguish between the self and the not self, between the true self and the not self. So what this may mean is that a not self response, when we're living in the not self of our energy, can trigger our T cells, just like an infection could, telling our body fight or flight, telling our body fight this infection, weakening the immune system response as the body fights this infection that is not an external infection, right? It's not a pathogen in our body, it's ourselves. It's us being in the not self. And then the body thinks that this is an infection. This is bacteria. Exhaustion, foggy brain, muscle fatigue, autoimmune disorders, all not self behavior. To identify which is which, we have to look at the body graph for the shadows and the traumas and how we're acting like our not self, what needs healing. Who we think we are, the personality. Are we actually this person, or is this the not self, right? If we're looking at our definition. Are we surrendering to our design, or are we trying to fight it with the personality? Are we giving into the not self energy of all of our undefined centers? Think about this. This is fucking mind-blowing that our T cells, which affect the way that our body works and our immune system. And it is, I am aware that right now I'm all sniffly and I have allergies and I have shit going on in my body. And I know why. And I'm working on it. So the irony is not lost on me. But think about this, that our body physically reacts to our not self behavior, putting us into fight or flight and affecting our immune system, which affects everything, right? So depression, yes, I can find it in the body graph, and I'm not done showing you where else it lays in the body graph. But it starts with trauma. I believe it starts with trauma. It starts with not processing our emotions fully and completely. And it starts with not knowing who we are, not seeing the shadows in our body graph so that we can start behaving as who we are, surrendering to the design and not letting the personality think that it's in charge, not letting the mind think that it's in charge of who we are. Because if the mind is in charge, it is going to act on conditionings. It is going to act on who it thinks it needs to be. This is something that we go deeply in the human design shadow training, but also in shadow stripper school. Who does it think it needs to be? Okay. Another thing that I've noticed is format energy. I talk about format energy. I have another podcast episode talking about format energy, so I won't go deeply into it, but I'm going to quote Martin Grassinger again, because he did a lot of work around what we need to, the biology of human design and what we need to eat. So this is something that I have found from my own research of I kind of went back to explore some of my deepest, darkest moments and what led up to that. And where was I physically in my body? And it was all 3 times that I can remember that there's been definitely depression in between, but my 3 deepest, darkest moments were all times that I lost in a lot of weight, a lot of weight, borderline anemic and vegetarian. So what this got me exploring was, how do I know what I need to eat? So yes, we have this arrow up here, right? Which one is it? I always get so confused. God damn it, with the variables. The first one's, please hold. I don't know why, but like I was telling Whitney this, and Whitney's gonna be the new variable queen. So you mark my words and you go follow Whitney. I will drop her information. But she's doing some deep work with the variables, and she sent me this thing because I'm like, why can't I ever figure this out? Like I literally can never remember what the variables are, which is which and how it works. Let me see here. Okay, I was right. So the first arrow is your determination. This is your PHS. This is how we want to be eating. And then the second one is the environment. I always forget. Okay, so yes, I can look at this and say, how should I be eating? And I can look at the tone and color, and mine is indirect light. Intermittent fasting is correct for me. Eating out of the sun is correct for me. Being in the shadows, correct for me. Being out of the limelight, also correct for me. I don't need to be eating a ton throughout the day. I don't need a lot of food. I really don't. I really do not. But it needs to be the correct thing. So what I learned doing some research on Martin Grassinger is that the 952, this format energy, needs meat. It needs animal protein in order to keep the body warm, in order to keep the body operating properly. Now, let me see what else I have here that I wanted to share on that. So he said that the 952 indicates animal protein for warmth and vitality and energy. The 360, whether you have the 3, the 60, or both, this is sugar and carbs are useful for this person. They need a baseline of sugar in the blood. How this works for you is going to look different. I'm not telling you go eat all the candy and all the chocolate, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is something that you need to look into for yourself and how it works for you. The 4253 needs a specific density of fats and oils. Fats and oils are important for your processes, for completing your cycles, while 360 needs the sugars and the carbs in order to start projects, while the 952 needs the animal protein and consistency to be still, to be warm enough to be still in the moment and focus. So this was really helpful for me in understanding, because I found that when I was not eating properly, so this arrow up here, your PHS, the tone, the color, as well in combination with your format energy, can help you understand the correct way for eating. Now, your environment too, right? I'm markets, I'm internal markets. So eating outside, out there with all the people, might not be correct for me. Eating in my home, I really love. I'm indoorsy. If you don't have format energy, I've talked about this before in my format energy podcast episode. If you don't have format energy, it's really important to understand how you might be amplifying the nervous system responses, the fight, flight, collapse, the behavioral coping mechanisms of your caregivers. In terms of food, I'll be honest with you, I don't know. This is something for you to explore. Here's the thing. What has worked for someone else is not going to work for you. That's what I've come to understand with human design, is that I can't give people the same prescription, because it just does not work. It just does not work. Okay. What the other thing I wanted to show here is leadership energy, 31, 7, 45. All of these leadership gates can feel like a lot of pressure, can feel like a lot of pressure to show up, right? Being a line 6 can feel like a lot of pressure. Being a line 3, being a failure, is a lot of pressure. Gate 24, the gate of addiction. You want to look at the gates and as well as the planets that might put pressure on the not self mind to be something it is not. So another huge place to look for depression is in your circuitry. Someone who is highly individual, empowering, centering, or integration circuitry, the individual, the centering, the individual knowing, the centering, or the integration circuitry, they're going to experience this pulse of life being on and life being off. When it's off, this can lead to depression if one does not know what to do with this energy. If we try to make sense of it, if we try to be someone that we are not, why can't I finish this project? Why can't I do this? Why can't I be like everyone else? Why am I depressed? Track your cycles. Women, how does it coincide with your menstrual cycle? Whether you still get a period or not, with your hormonal cycle. Track it with your emotions if you're defined emotionally. This on-off pulse, and I do talk about it, I have another episode talking about it, is crucial to understanding who you are. And I want to, as I close this out, I want to make a point to say there's no part of us that needs to be fixed. We're not broken. We're not like a fucking machine, right? We're not machines. We're not machines. We're not made to work like machines. We're not. And the more that we try to push ourselves to work like machines, especially with an undefined root, with an undefined solar plexus, with an undefined sacral, with an undefined spleen, the more that we push ourselves, ego, all of the undefined centers, to act in a certain way because society has expected that of us, the more we are going to create not self energy. And as we have learned with the T cells, ruin our immune system. The more that we're going to create depression, sadness, hopelessness. For some of us, depression, certain levels of depression are normal and they don't need to be fixed. Depression has such a negative connotation, negative perspective. The meaning that we've given to the word depression is so like, bleh, right? But what if those feelings, and this is what the individual circuitry tells us, is that these feelings of being low and these feelings of sadness and depression are actually the mutation. It's the mutation coming in. If you're line 3, even line 6, you're responsible for the material plane. You see when mutation starts to occur, when the collective needs to be taken into a different direction. You see this, and it's up to you to take us there. That's a lot of pressure too. But what the individual circuitry tells us is that it's in that off place when all the energy has drained, when we're in a low, in a depressive state, that the mutation can drop in. So what I've been working with myself, and this is, I'm probably going to do another episode on this as I explore it even more from a psychological perspective and from a human design perspective. But what I recommend we all do is change the meaning that we've given depression and the way that we interact with it. Maybe it's not something that needs to be fixed. Maybe it's something that needs to be felt. Maybe it's something that needs to be sat with and allowed to exist, just like our emotions, just like our feelings. As soon as we allow them to exist, we recognize that they're fleeting, right? That they don't stay. They just want to say what they have to say. It's like the inner child, the work that we do with the inner child and the shadows. Your shadows aren't here to hurt you. They're not here to be fixed. As you'll learn in Shadow Stripper School, their shadows are meant to be integrated, not fixed. We're stripping away conditioning and self-deprecation and, self-doubt. But our shadows are meant to be integrated, because our shadows tell us where we are not allowing ourselves to be exactly who we are. So if depression is in my body graph, then depression is part of who I am. And it's just my cycle. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing or anything that collapses me forever or for even long periods of time. And what I've started to do in my business and what I help other people do as well with the highly individual energy is create a business that is sustainable for you when you are in your cycles. It's making your business fit into your life, not your life fit your business, right? So that you can safely be in your cycles of highs and lows, and it doesn't have to mean anything. You don't lose money. There's no pressure. There's no pressure. There's no stress. That's what we want to get to. And I think that that's what human design really helps us do, is validate who we are, who we've always been, depression or not, who we've always been. And it helps us find a different way of living. And that's what I've started to recognize, is that every time that I try to focus on creating my business or my life based on what somebody else has done, it doesn't work. And it throws me into the not self, into a deeper levels of depression that I can't get out of, because I'm trying to create a business and a life based on somebody else's design. So when we start to look at our own design and what does my design need from me? Where do I need to surrender to my design and create a business, a life that is in alignment, that is essentially in that is balanced with my body graph, right? That there isn't this constant internal struggle. I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to think about this episode. I know we went a lot of different places, starting with depression in the body graph and ending with there's nothing to fix. We're all perfect the way we are. I really do believe that. I do think it's just more about creating a life that is in alignment with our design instead of fighting our design. But like I promised, this is only part 1. I don't know when part 2 will come, but I'm doing some deep research on this, so it'll be there for you. Thanks for watching. Excited to hear what you all think. See you next time.